Welcome to topic 2.2 of module 2. In this particular video, we will be learning about diffusion. During the course of this video, try and answer as many questions as you can from module 2, topic 2.2. The learning objectives of this video are to describe the laws of diffusion and how these relate to biological function with respect to the movement of molecules in body fluids and respiratory gases, describe the process of osmosis and how it relates to tonicity, describe the role of plasma proteins and how they relate to capillary permeability, and finally, to understand the process of facilitated diffusion and what saturation and selectivity of carriers mean. Diffusion is a process where molecules or ions move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. This movement of molecules down the concentration gradient is caused by the kinetic energy inside the molecules and ions and is based on the molecular kinetic theory. According to the molecular kinetic theory, molecules move continuously because of kinetic energy. The constant, random, and high-speed motion of molecules results in collisions with each other and the walls of the container. With each collision, the particles change direction and scatter throughout the environment without the need for any additional energy. Even though the molecules are continuously colliding with each other, there is no loss of kinetic energy. The driving force of diffusion is the kinetic energy of the molecules themselves. Therefore, the speed of diffusion is influenced by the size of the molecule, as large molecules tend to move slower, and also by the temperature of the molecules, as hot molecules tend to move faster, thereby increasing the speed of diffusion. The molecular kinetic theory of gases plays an important role in understanding the mechanism of breathing. Breathing involves two steps. Inhalation is when we draw air into the lungs, and exhalation causes respiratory gases to be expelled from the lungs. Inhalation is an active process, meaning it requires energy. When the dome-shaped diaphragm contracts, it moves inferiorly and flattens out, causing the thoracic cavity to expand. As a result, the lungs expand and increase in volume. This causes the air pressure inside the lungs to drop lower than the atmospheric pressure. Whenever the air pressure inside the lungs is less than the atmospheric pressure, air rushes into the lungs along the pressure gradient. In healthy individuals, expiration is a passive process that depends on lung elasticity. In expiration, the diaphragm recoils to its original shape, and as a result, the volume of the lungs decreases. This causes the air pressure inside the lungs to rise above that of atmospheric pressure. This difference in the pressure gradient forces the air out of the lungs. In summary, diffusion uses kinetic energy of molecules to move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration and does not require any outside energy source. Diffusion is a continuous process until the concentrations form an equilibrium. The rate of diffusion is faster when the concentration gradient is higher, over shorter distances, at higher temperatures, and for smaller molecules. Slide 8 shows the different kinds of passive membrane transport processes, and you may wish to pause the video here to study it further. Diffusion of molecules across the plasma membrane can happen via different processes. It is dependent on factors such as lipid solubility and size. In simple diffusion, nonpolar and lipid-soluble substances diffuse directly through the lipid bilayer of the plasma membrane. Such substances include gases, water, small water-soluble molecules, and fat-soluble molecules. However, large molecules such as glucose, amino acids, and ions cannot freely pass through the lipid bilayer. Instead, they can be allowed to move through the membrane by a passive transport process called facilitated diffusion. In carrier-mediated facilitated diffusion, protein carriers specific for one molecule or chemical are situated within the plasma membrane. Once the molecule is bound to these carrier proteins, they change shape to transport the protein from outside of the membrane into the cell. In channel-mediated facilitated diffusion, transmembrane proteins transport substances such as ions or water through channels from outside of the membrane and into the cell. These channels are very selective due to pore size and the charges of amino acids lining the channel. Finally, osmosis is the diffusion of water through a selectively permeable membrane, often using protein channels called aquaporins. The selective permeability of the plasma membrane does not allow large molecules and non-lipid soluble substances to pass through. Hence, facilitated diffusion plays an important role in transporting substances such as glucose and amino acids into the cell. Facilitated diffusion is a passive transport process, meaning it does not require any energy. Although facilitated diffusion is free in terms of energy requirement, construction of the protein carriers that transport these large molecules across the cell membrane is expensive. Unlike simple diffusion, carrier-mediated transport is limited by the number of protein carriers that are available. For example, when all the glucose carriers are engaged, meaning that glucose transport is occurring at its maximum rate, the carriers are said to be saturated. Furthermore, these carriers are selective, which means the protein carriers that allow the glucose movement into the cell will not allow other sugars or amino acids to pass through them. The protein carriers in the carrier-mediated facilitated diffusion are integral proteins of the membrane that are specific for transporting certain molecules. These include molecules that are too large and cannot pass through the lipid bilayer. Whenever a molecule needs to be transported from the extracellular fluid compartment into the cell, it binds to the protein carrier. The protein carrier then changes its shape to release the substance across the membrane and into the cell. The protein carrier then returns to its original shape, ready to transport another molecule. From this video, we have learnt about diffusion and how molecular kinetic theory plays an important role in facilitating diffusion. We have also learnt about the mechanism involved in breathing and the various rules of diffusion. And finally, we have learnt briefly about facilitated diffusion.